In today's video, we're making a little Halloween treat. Nothing says trick or treat like a glowing jack-o'-lantern. I'll show you how I created this glass on glass mosaic. From selecting glass, cutting, adhesive, and grouting. And if you've been wanting to learn how to tile on a curved surface, this might be the project for you. Let's get to it. Welcome back, and if you're new here, my name is Julie. And on this channel, we talk about tips, tricks, tools, adhesives, materials, and specific mosaic projects, all to shorten your learning curve when it comes to creating mosaic art. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. Glass on glass mosaic or GOG projects are a lot of fun to create. And the reason that you're using glass as the substrate is you probably want the light to show through your tesserae, and that's the case with today's project. So glass on glass mosaic includes projects where obviously the substrate is glass, but the tesserae could be items such as vitreous glass, glass beads, glass tile, millefiori, smalty, or, as in today's project, stained glass. Today's project, although rather simple once you get going, does take time, and I'll explain why in a minute. So I'll not only show you what I did, but I'll also share other ways that you can cut down your tiling time. There are pros and cons, and we'll get into it. I've done a number of videos here on the channel all about using glass in your mosaic, and I'll include a link to the playlist down below in the description so you can check it out. Also keep in mind that with glass on glass mosaic, there are a variety of adhesives that you can use depending on the desired end result. So in other words, if you have transparent glass, you probably wouldn't want to use a dark gray cement-based adhesive behind it. You'd want to use something that highlights and brightens the glass you're using. Personally, with most of my glass on glass mosaics, I like to use a clear adhesive so that if someone should see the mosaic from behind, it would look similar to how it looks from the front. But again, this is just personal preference. So in today's project, I'm using a combination of transparent and translucent stained glass. And since this is a votive, some of the stained glass will allow all of the light to pass through, while the translucent glass will only allow some of the light to pass through. It's a nice mix, and I like combining the two types of glass. Having said that, I'm definitely using a clear adhesive for this project. So in today's video, I'll show you how to tile a curved glass surface. We'll also talk about glass selection, how big to cut your tesserae compared to your substrate, and the special type of grout I'll be using. And an extra hint, I'll also be changing the color of the quote grout. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Let's talk about the substrate and tesserae for this project. The substrate is a round glass votive that measures 3.5 inches high, and I'll include some substrate options for you down below in the description. And as I mentioned earlier, the tesserae is stained glass exclusively. I decided on 4 shades of orange stained glass, from light to dark. For the pumpkin's face, I used a few scrap pieces of black stained glass. Most of the glass was still uncut as a sheet, so I used my glass cutters to score the glass and running pliers to cut them down. On the day that I was cutting down the glass, I was struggling with a bit of hand pain, which is why you see me using different cutters. I was trying to see which one felt best for my hand. And for the record, the pistol grip was the most comfortable for me that day. So I scored and cut strips of glass, which I could then cut down further using my wheeled glass nippers. If you aren't sure how to cut down stained glass, or maybe you're wondering what is the best glass cutting tool for you, well, I've done a series of videos here on the channel all about stained glass, and I'll include a link to the playlist down below in the description so you can check it out. So as I said, I cut the glass down into strips, and then I used my wheeled glass nippers to cut random shapes. If you don't want random shapes for your votive, you can certainly cut rectangles, squares, or even circles. I just personally wanted random shapes. Now, before I started cutting all of the strips down to random shapes, I cut a piece of stained glass and kept holding it up to the glass substrate. And I would make minor nips to it using my wheeled glass nippers. I wanted to make sure that the tesserae size allowed it to completely make contact with the glass surface of the votive. Remember, I don't want any sharp points sticking out. So I kept doing this nipping process until I was happy with the size of the tesserae. And then this tesserae acted as my guide for all of the tesserae I cut moving forward. Next, I cut out the black stained glass for the pumpkin's eyes. I did this by cutting out 3 simple triangles, which are all about the same size. For the mouth, I drew a design on copy paper, cut it out, and then traced it onto the stained glass using a permanent marker. Then I cut out the mouth using my glass cutter and wheeled glass nippers. I then further cut out the mouth into 4 pieces or sections. I'll include a list down below in the description for all of the substrates, materials, tools, adhesives, all the extra goodies that I used in today's video in case you'd like to make a glowing jack-o'-lantern of your own. Now that we've talked about the substrate and tesserae, it's time to get started with the tiling. Now the only prep work you need to do with this glass substrate is to make sure the tiling surface is clean. The adhesive for this project is Lexol. It's a clear silicone, so it's a little stinky. It's messy if you get it on your hands or anywhere else for that matter. It's also waterproof, but once dry, it's a great adhesive for glass on glass. To start, I like to tape down a piece of wax paper onto my work table. The reason for the wax paper is that I like to squeeze out Lexol onto it and butter the back of each piece of tesserae with the adhesive, as opposed to squeezing out a little adhesive directly to the back of each tesserae. So by buttering the back of each tesserae, this keeps the tip of my Lexol tube clear and clean, but also keeps air out of it so it won't dry up as fast. So I work with a smaller amount of the adhesive at a time, which also keeps the Lexol pretty smooth and really nice and easy to work with. So I got started with tiling by adhering the tesserae to the jack-o'-lantern's face. I didn't measure where I placed the triangles and mouth. I just eyed it. Next, I started adhering the orange tesserae around the face. I didn't stress if 2 of the same color were next to each other, especially since I'm only working with 4 colors of orange, but I try to avoid it if possible. And as I said earlier, the tiling of this project is pretty straightforward. I buttered the back of each tesserae using a wood craft stick and placed it on the substrate. I like how Lexol is a bit forgiving if you need to move your tesserae around, but it does also quickly firm up a little, which helps keep pieces from sliding down. Good old gravity. Now these are small tesserae, so there wasn't much sliding down at all. As I adhered each tesserae, the only thing I always kept in mind was I wanted to make sure none of the Lexel came up between two pieces of tesserae to the point that it was at the stained glass surface. Remember, this is going to be a grouted mosaic. Therefore, I need an open space in between the tesserae to create a grout line. And yes, there were some instances when I needed to clean out the Lexel, and I did this with a pointed toothpick as opposed to using any of my good metal picks. If you've worked with silicone before, you know how messy it can get. So although I did have to use my wheeled glass nippers and tweezers from time to time, I tried to avoid using any of my other tools. And I'll show you how to clean those up, including your hands, in a little bit. Soap and water won't cut it. You don't want the silicone to dry on your tools. Now, by this point, or each time you're done tiling for the day, your fingers are probably going to be very sticky. Maybe not, but probably. But if they are, I like to put a little olive oil on a paper towel and wipe my hands, including my fingernails, as well as the handles of whatever tools I'm using. So in this case of today's project, that's my tweezers and wheeled glass nippers. I don't want any of the sticky silicone still on them or me. So I rub the paper towel back and forth, and I even clean out underneath my fingernails, and then I wash my hands a few times with soap and water to get the oil off. And bonus, you end up with softer, moisturized hands after doing this. Well. As I tiled the substrate, I didn't measure the grout line. I just made sure there was enough consistent open space between the tesserae. Keep in mind that because my pieces are on the small side, that means my grout will be more obvious, as opposed to making a larger votive where my tesserae could handle being larger as well, and the grout wouldn't be as obvious, if that makes sense. I did try to keep the grout line rather small on this piece, despite the fact that I'll be using a sanded type grout. Now, if you're using transparent or translucent stained glass, for example, like I am in this project, you'll want to make sure you apply adhesive to the entire back of each tessera. Otherwise, you'll risk grout bleed, and you don't want that. Grout bleed is when grout is able to get up under the transparent glass. So when looking at your mosaic from the front, you can see the grout up underneath your transparent or translucent glass. It happens, but at least if you try to avoid it during the tiling phase, you have a much better chance of avoiding it. And as I said, I'm buttering the back of each tessera, but you can certainly smooth a layer of adhesive directly onto the substrate instead. I've done it both ways, and there are pros and cons. I'm buttering each tessera for a few reasons. First, I'm trying to do my best to discourage grout bleed. Second, I'm taking my time with the tiling. It would go much faster if I smeared the adhesive directly onto the substrate. But like I said, I'm taking my time, I'm trying to avoid grout bleed, and I'm enjoying the monotonous tiling. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. I was very into my head and thoughts the day that I tiled this, and it was the perfect project for doing some deep thinking, if you will. Sometimes when you spread the adhesive directly onto the substrate, you have a greater risk of the adhesive coming up between the tesserae and onto the stained glass surface. Also, you'll need to work much quicker as the air will hit the adhesive and cause it to start drying faster. I make it a general rule with myself that whenever I squeeze out more Lexel onto the wax paper, that I also clean off my wood craft stick with a paper towel. It usually cleans off easily, and I'm able to get back to applying adhesive. I do this cleaning off of the craft stick to contain where the adhesive goes while buttering each tessera. You'll see that it builds up if you don't clean it off. I'm picking up the jack-o'-lantern every time I'm adhering a new piece of tessera to the substrate. If you'd rather not do it that way, You could put the votive on a potter's wheel and turn it, which would avoid you having to pick it up and put it down every time. I tiled all the way around the outside of the jack-o'-lantern, but did not tile the bottom. I left that as clear glass. The jack-o'-lantern was not mosaiced all in one day. It took a while, multiple hours, because the pieces are so small. I may have been able to tile a larger votive in the same amount of time because those tesserae would have been bigger. So this isn't a quick project, although I can't wait to see the grouted mosaic. Once I was done tiling, I let the jack-o'-lantern sit for at least 48 hours before I grouted. I'll include a list down below in the description for all of the substrates, materials, tools, adhesives, and extra goodies that I used in today's video in case you'd like to make your own jack-o'-lantern mosaic. You can access this information by clicking the Show More button underneath the description. That's if you're on your computer, and if you're watching on your phone or tablet, you can click the down arrow that's just to the right of the title of this video. The jack-o'-lantern has been sitting here drying for 2 days, and I've checked the tesserae and nothing's moving. I love grouting glass on glass projects because the substrate allows for easy cleanup. However, glass substrates can also be tricky, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. I'm going to use a special grout for this mosaic, and that grout is thin-set mortar. So if you're outside the United States, then you'll want to look for a cement-based adhesive. So the reason I'm using thin-set as the quote grout instead of using traditional grout is because I need to have an adhesive in the grout when the substrate is glass. I need the grout to adhere to the glass. If you only have plain grout that's not fortified meaning there are polymers added in, then you can add a latex additive to make it usable with a glass substrate. I've done a number of videos here on the channel all about grout and thin-set, from how to mix it up to how to color it and tint it. Is it fortified? Is it not? And I'll include a link to the playlist down below in the description so you can check it out. Now, on top of using thin-set as the quote grout, I also want to add a black oxide to make it darker. Since this is a Halloween themed mosaic, I think really dark grout would be appropriate and called for. I started with gray thin-set mortar and mixed in the black oxide. If you aren't familiar with oxides, these are concentrated powders that can be mixed in with traditional grout or cement-based adhesives. Again, check the playlist down below in the description to see how I've colored and tinted grout and thin-set. I like the color of the thin-set, and I'm ready to get started with grouting. I should note that this votive doesn't require any prep work, so I can just get started. I'll start by applying a small amount of thin-set to the mosaic surface, and I'll push it into the grout line in a clockwise, counterclockwise motion. I'm moving the grout around, distributing it to all of the open areas. Now, because the open grout line is somewhat small, I'm taking my time to make sure I get the grout pushed into all of the openings. And because I don't have any sharp points sticking out and all of the stained glass is at the same level, the grouting goes rather quickly. So if you were to grout a mosaic that's on a glass substrate using plain, non-fortified grout, then you'd risk the grout cracking and not sticking to the substrate. This is why you need an adhesive in your grout. The thin-set will stick to the glass substrate. Another benefit of using thin-set as the grout is that although this is a votive, it could also be used as a small vase. And because I used a fortified cement-based adhesive as the grout, it can be subjected to water. Once I'm done grouting the body of the pumpkin, so to speak, I'll make sure to run thin-set along the top of the votive where the stained glass meets the glass substrate. And then I'll do the same for the bottom. Doing this creates a really nice, clean edge. And now I'll let it sit here and dry for 10 minutes or so, and then I'll come back and clean it up. Okay, the votive has been sitting here drying and now it's time to remove the excess grout. I'm using paper towels to clean up the mosaic, and I'll do it in the same exact way as I did putting on the thin set, which is in a clockwise counterclockwise motion. I'm not pushing too hard. I'm just wiping off the excess grout. I don't want to risk cleaning out the grout line or dislodging a piece of tesserae. Because the votive is so small, this is a fairly quick process. I'm just wiping off the excess grout that's on the surface of the stained glass. Once I'm done cleaning off the body of the votive, I'll gently run a paper towel along the top edge and then the bottom edge to create a smooth surface. I'll also make sure there's no thin set stuck to the glass substrate, whether that's inside or on the bottom. And then I'll take one last look at the votive to make sure I didn't miss cleaning off any spots. For safety and cleanliness reasons, I prefer to use a battery-operated votive light instead of a burning candle. And there you have it, a gorgeous Halloween jack-o'-lantern votive covered in multiple shades of orange stained glass. It's the perfect addition to your bookcase or coffee table. I'll include a list down below in the description for all of the materials, tools, substrates, and extra goodies that I used in today's video in case you'd like to make your very own glass-on-glass jack-o'-lantern light-up votive. Question of the day, let me know down in the comments if you've ever made a glass-on-glass mosaic votive, and what materials did you use, and what adhesive did you use? I would love to hear. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up as it really does help my channel, and subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell notification so you never miss a single upload, and let me know in the comments if there's something you'd like me to cover in a future video. I'll see you soon. Bye. Man, what? Boy, I tell you, life is precious. Don't we know it, right? Hug the ones you love. Hug them. Love up on them. You just never know. Wow, that just got deep, didn't it? All right. All right. Woo, let's get all excited. Leave that for later. Cause this is a long video. Oh, yes it is. Yes it is. Nope. For you, no. Eventually I'm gonna get it out like zip, super like zip, yeah. If you're looking for more mosaic inspiration, you can check out one of these two videos. Until then, see ya. Thanks for being here, guys. I'll see you soon.